3, 2, 1, 0.
Dilly,
Dilly
dilly.
dilly. Yeah. All right. So, welcome everyone to the first episode of. I haven't actually figured out a name for it yet. I'll just call it the Christian Man's Guide to Not Sucking. That's what this is going to be called. Episode 1. You laugh. I'm actually going to call it that.
Okay.
And I am here with somebody that I care a lot about. Someone that's very close to me. I don't know if you know this, but a group of people has actually dubbed you Mama Valley. And yeah,
That's a cool name.
yeah, I've been telling them a little bit about kind of the stuff that you do, a little bit about your story and everything, and they just think you're awesome. So you had to be the first person that I talked to. So this woman, her name's Carrie Grace. She's done a lot in her life. She's lived a very Hollywood-worthy life in terms of just all the crazy stuff that's happened. And she's done a lot for the Lord. She's done a lot for others. She's spent such an amazing portion of her life serving others in a way that only she can. This is the best intro that you've ever been given, hasn't it?
I know. I'm
Yeah.
just like, wow.
And most of all, she gave birth to me. So welcome, Carrie Grace, my mother. Well done, everybody. Thank you so much, Amelia. So there's a lot of things that I want to talk to you about because you're just such an expert in so many things and you hate that word. But you're somebody that's just worked with a lot of hurting people of all, genders, age ranges, everything. Like you probably have the most diverse track record of just dealing with people's crap of anybody that I've ever met. But first, obviously you don't have to go into super detail. Just give the people a little information about yourself, tell them a bit of your story and what you're up to now.
Wow. Well, when you're my age and someone asks you that question, it's really difficult because there's a lot of chapters. So rapid fire, a little bit about me. I was born in a small town in East Texas that doesn't actually have a population sign. So there's that. And unless you follow girls basketball on a high school level, you would have never heard of my hometown, which is Martins Mill. But they are famous for their girls basketball. So I'm kind of proud about that.
Way to rep the hometown there.
Always. I have to. I am a hometown girl. So, I grew up in a family that we really loved each other, but we were highly dysfunctional in every way that a family could be dysfunctional. We didn't know we were dysfunctional. We didn't know that outside entities could have labeled us very easily as dysfunctional because to us it was just normal. But I pretty much experienced everything that is, not awesome for a kid by the time I was 18. We dealt with, in our home, we dealt with abuse and addiction and divorce and we kind of covered it all. So I learned a lot. Really, my coping skills looked acceptable to the world. I dealt with anxiety, stress, and whatever discomfort by performing. And that worked really well. And no one picked up on the fact that, I was probably struggling in a lot of ways. So I did every sport that a girl could do at my school, did all the extracurricular activities, kept a high GPA, and that was my outlet for coping. I carried that on into adulthood. So I think for me, my adult years have been, a continuation of trying to figure out if I don't have to push so hard all the time, what would I just love my life to be like if it wasn't this constant running, because that's what I know, that's how I'm wired, from my childhood. What would that experience be? And so I think where I'm at today is really beginning that journey of figuring out, who am I just supposed to be? I came here with a purpose. I believe that every single one of us, we're all so unique. There's no way that there's not a diversity in our purpose and the impact we can make. And if I don't feel like I have to, I guess kind of keep all the plates spinning, if I really just focus on the ones that I was meant to spin, what would life look like? And so that's really where I'm at today. I've done a lot of different, careers in my life. I've been a teacher. I've been a homeschool mom. You're welcome. I always told my kids, I'll just go ahead and pay for your therapy when you grow up because it'll probably all be my fault. I've owned a business myself. I've been in ministry for decades, counseling. I've run nonprofits helping sex traffic victims. I've traveled to lots of places around the world just to show up where people are desperate. And so I tell people I feel like I've seen the best of what humankind has to offer, and I've seen the worst. And I'm very optimistic after seeing all of it. So
you're definitely in the category of a high performance individual. And I kind of love what you said about performance being a coping mechanism. And I feel like a lot of high performance individuals kind of fly under the radar, and we don't necessarily see their struggle because all we see is triumph after triumph. And the sad thing about high performance individuals that don't come to that realization of, okay, what exactly am I doing? What mountain am I trying to climb? Is this the right mountain? Do I need to do it so vigorously all the time? And what happens is eventually they get to the tip of the mountain. They get to the top of their industry or whatever the case may be. And they look down and they think, well, that was pretty pointless. Or they spend decades of their lives building this empire or whatever, knowing at the end of it, finally realizing, oh, wow, this is all going to fade away. This is all going to be torn down brick by brick. Someone else is going to come along and nobody's going to remember this in 30 plus years. And, the interesting thing about us as Christians is that we get to participate in building a kingdom that will never fall down. And so we can find hope even in the lonely moments of feeling like maybe we're not performing up to standard or maybe wondering if what we're doing is going to last. It's like what God decides to do through us, it's never going to be torn down, So I love what you said about that. I think I'd love to hear about the moment, and I think a lot of people would love to hear this story when 3 women showed up to your door, and as a single, or not a single mother yet, a married housewife, pastor's wife, homeschooling mom, like how do you make that switch to now, going to Iraq multiple times, working with ISIS victims, all the crazy stuff? It seems like that was kind of the pivotal moment.
it definitely was. This is where, you just can't make this stuff up. I would have never realized what I believe God was calling me to do next. I wouldn't have realized it if 3 women hadn't rang my doorbell one day. I was at home, with you and your sister, just homeschooling, doing our normal little bubble Christian life. I had pretty well packaged it as best I could to be perfect, because that made me feel safe. And these 3 women show up at my door. The doorbell rings. I go to the door, and they're standing there, and I can't figure out, they're not selling anything. They don't have any products. And they just looked at me and they said, "We were told if we came here, you would be nice to us." And it was just such a strange, statement to make. And so I just said, "Who sent you to my house? You obviously have my address." So how did you get to my home? And they explained to me they'd gone to a church. The church had a billboard. We've all seen them, driving down the highway. And it basically said, "Do you need financial help?" Well, they did. They needed money. They didn't know that in church lingo, that means, do you want to take a Dave Ramsey stewardship class? To them, they're like, "We need financial help." Yeah. So they stopped at the church to get financial help. And the lady, begins kind of probing and asking them questions about, do you have a relationship with God? And, things like that. And they're trying to determine, do I have to say yes to get the money? And finally, the lady says, "Well, would y'all like to come to church? You can come visit on a Sunday." And they said, "No, we can't come to your church." And the lady was like, "Of course you can. Anybody can come." And they said, "No, we can't, because we're strippers here at the club in Fort Worth. And if we come to your church, we're going to see our customers. And they're going to be sitting with their families and their wives, and they're going to know that we don't belong." And so that's when the lady sent them and said, go find this woman, Carrie, and she'll be nice to you. And that still to this day, I have a hard time telling that story. I don't know how many times I've told it, because it was such a pivotal moment. But I can't even imagine going to a stranger's house with just that statement of, she'll be nice to you. And, I didn't have anything really to offer. I had no idea why I was picked as the person that would be nice to them. I just knew that if they showed up at my door and they were courageous enough to come to a stranger's house, that I was just going to invite them in and try to figure out, what's next. And they kept coming to my house. I started what, I guess we could call an informal support group. Was started in my living room, and and they came on a weekly basis for a long time, and I built relationships, and 2 of them ended up getting out of the industry and got started in new paths, and it was awesome. But one, she had a daughter who was disabled, and she couldn't put her in just regular daycare, didn't have family around to help her. And so the only way she knew to make ends meet for her and her daughter was to strip. And she had a live-in boyfriend that would stay, a few nights a week while she went to the club. And, she would just come to my house before her shift and literally throw up in my bathroom because she was that sick over what she was about to have to go do. And she didn't want to do it. And she was like, I don't want anybody to touch me. I don't want to take my clothes off. I don't want to get drunk till I pass out. Like, I don't want to do this. And it, sitting with her, I didn't know how to help her. I didn't have resources. I didn't have, later I would have an organization that helped women get out, but I didn't at that time. This was back in 2004. And all I knew was, I think if we trusted God, maybe he would do something. Like, that's really the best that I had at the time to offer her, unfortunately. And I've never forgotten her, because she's the one that showed me the reality behind this whole industry. She wasn't putting herself through college. She wasn't doing this because she felt empowered, and she wasn't having a good time. And I think that that's kind of the red pill, so to speak,
Gosh.
that I got offered and saw behind the curtain, and it changed everything for me.
Yeah. I think that's a good PSA to all the fellas out there that are hitting up the strip club every weekend with your boys, throwing $1 bills probably. They are not happy. These women are not happy in those situations. They are intoxicated out of their minds trying to put on a show in order to either provide for somebody that is tyrannical and domineering towards them, that has no care for their well-being, or in this case, somebody that can't fend for themselves. But that was a pretty interesting, enlightening moment. I could tell that, whenever I was about 10, 11 years old, that's when you started volunteering in a capacity for an organization that was doing that. And then a few years later, you're then taking over that organization, kind of rebranding it, restarting it, making your own thing. And I still remember when you sat me down for lunch one day and were like, hey, by the way, I'm going to Iraq. And this was during the time where ISIS was on, every headline. They had been on every headline for the past 6 months. All the crazy stuff that they were doing to the Yazidis over there, just unspeakable, inhumane things. And here my mom is telling me, hey, yeah, I'm going. What on earth possessed you to do that?
Yeah, this is really not that different than 3 strippers showing up at my door. This came by invitation, and I feel like God has kind of done that in my life. I was, like you said, I was running my organization. We were just a local nonprofit that, we met with women, went to the strip clubs, invited them to a support group, just tried to help them have a different path, help them with, financial needs, counseling, all the things we thought that would be beneficial to them if they wanted to step out of that lifestyle. We just wanted to build a path for them to be able to do that. So that's the work I'd been doing. I'd written programs and we've been successful with what we were doing. But I sitting in my computer one day and I get an email from another organization that I had worked with some when I needed their assistance for things. They would come and help. And they were over in Iraq doing rescues and recoveries for women and children that had been captured by ISIS. While they were there doing this work, they were called in by the consulate there in Iraq. And the consulate explained to them that we are so appreciative of you being here and the work that you're doing. But unfortunately, when the women are being placed into the refugee camps after y'all help them get to safety, they're just committing suicide. There's no trauma care. There's no way for them to cope with what they've been through. And so we need help in the camps. We need someone who can come and work with the women after they've been rescued because they have no hope. They don't know how to handle what they're experiencing post the trauma. So I get this email from this organization and the consulate in Iraq asking me if I would come and basically set up an aftercare trauma program in the refugee camps for the victims of ISIS. And, I'm reading this email and it's not like I read the email and went, of course, I obviously am the best choice to go, set up a trauma care program in Iraq. Not at all. Like I was going, there's no way. There's got to be people that are way more qualified than me to go do this. Like I don't have enough experience and I don't have enough initials after my name. Like there's no way I should be the person to do this. And this is one of those moments I literally got on my face praying and asking God, like, if you want me to do this, then you're going to have to let me know for sure that this is from you, because there's no way I'm going to go take that risk and it not be, something God was asking me to do. And while I'm on my face praying, he just spoke one statement to me. He said, I just need you to bring my presence. And that's when I knew, I can do that. And then it made sense to me. Not that I'm any more spiritual than anyone else, but I knew I wouldn't rely on my experience or anything like that because I didn't feel qualified anyways. But I knew what it was like to carry the presence of God into strip clubs every month. I knew what it was like to sit with people that were hurting and know that if they can encounter the tangible love of Christ, things can start to change. And so I said yes. And, I went to my board to ask permission if I could go to Iraq because that was kind of a big deal. And they were 100%, supportive. And they knew if we have this opportunity to go help and we don't do it, then that's on us that we said no.
Yeah.
And so, with their blessing, I was able to go. And that was February of 2016. And wow. I made 7 trips in 2 years to Iraq. And
flying coach.
Yes, flying coach. Oh my gosh, yes.
That's one of the longest flights you can make in existence, right?
I don't think it is. It's
up there.
It's a long flight. It's a couple of flights.
Yeah. And I mean, you're hearing some of the most, this is some of the most diabolical stuff that human beings can do to one another. And you're sitting across from somebody that's experienced that or that has lost people as a result of it. Like there's a lot of darkness in that kind of environment. How do you bring the love of Christ into that? How do you possibly inject light into that situation when you're sitting across from somebody that's experienced the darkest that you can experience on this earth?
All I can tell you is that he shows up, and that's really the vision that I saw before I left and just praying before I went. I just saw Jesus moving among the tents, he would duck and go into these white tents. And I hadn't even seen where I was going yet. But literally when I saw the camp, I was like, that's what I saw. And every time he would go into a tent, light would come. And I just saw him moving among the camp. And so I knew that as I came in to every single tent, that I would be bringing his light and his peace and his comfort, his love. And it's not something that you can do in the natural. If I just relied on Carrie and thought I could just show up and, there wouldn't have been any fruit. And I would have felt completely drained and defeated, because it's just, you literally move from one family to the next and they tell you the most horrific things I've ever heard. I don't tell people a lot of what I heard because I don't think people need that in their heads to even know that that's what human beings can do to other human beings. Yeah. And yet these were the survivors. And it was so much complex, ongoing trauma. It wasn't like once they were in the camp, the trauma stopped. They had already experienced, these women had watched their husbands be killed or be forced to convert. They had watched their children be exploited and abused in horrific ways. They had been horrifically exploited and abused. So much, had already happened. And then they get to the camp, and where the camp was located, we're just 15 minutes from Mosul. So bombs are still going off. Like, I'm sitting in the camps and I could still hear bombs going off. And so every time bombs went off, everyone in the camps reacted. They were having trauma seizures. It was just so much because they don't know who may have just been hurt or killed. Because they all had family that was still captured. And now they're living in a camp. And these were people that they had homes like us and cars like us. It's not like they were this third world country like we kind of envision they're living in dirt huts or something. They had nice homes and nice cars and lived in cities just like us. And now they lived in a camp with a tent and a dirt floor and no heaters, and they've lost everything and there's no hope for the future. So all I can tell you is that every single time, every single trip, I saw the Lord show up, and he brought healing in layers, and joy finally came back, to the people, and hope finally was kind of the last one to show back up. They had to walk through so much grief and anger and forgiveness. And it was just so much. And they are still my heroes. They're the most resilient women I've ever had the honor to serve. And they've inspired a lot of the things that I've written.
Wow. So you do that for 2 years, basically. You just go tour after tour, we would say, back and forth to Iraq. You go to Scotland, you go to all these different places, and then you decide, okay, we're going to do this domestically. So you do all the safe houses and everything like that. You've been doing that for the past however many years. And now you decide, okay, I'm going to switch lanes. I'm going to start helping businesses. I'm going to start helping individual women to kind of reclaim their own lives and their femininity and all this stuff. How did that shift happen? Because like from housewife to, G.I. Jane over here going into the refugee camps is one thing, but then to go back to kind of almost this female self-improvement, Christ-centered arena, that's an even bigger shift in a way. So like, how did that happen?
I think that, first of all, I'm going into my 12th year of working in anti-human trafficking, working with victims. And everything that I have poured into and created for the last 12 years has been focused around trauma and resiliency and the ability to restart your life from nothing. Mm-hmm. And I've watched women do it and be successful. Very successful. And I watch them and I just think, okay, if they can do it, then what about the rest of us who haven't been through some of these horrific things, haven't had everything stolen from them and so much abuse? And like, why are we living our lives not empowered and not, full of impact every single day, full of purpose? And I just kind of see, as a nation, I feel like there's sort of this dulling of the people that I sense. And my story shouldn't really stand out. I don't feel like I'm some extraordinary person. I'm just an ordinary person that said yes to the opportunities that were in front of me. And yet I feel like because we have kind of dulled our lives and ourselves, I see, what if what I've been experiencing could be multiplied exponentially across the board to so many other people? Then it's not just me having these extraordinary experiences, but it's a multitude of people.
Right.
So part of the transition is just seeing that, number one, I feel like there's a scripture in the Old Testament that says, write the vision down and make it plain so that others can run with it. And I feel like I've done that. I've written so many programs for survivors, and I've trained so many other people to be able to carry those programs and that vision and run with it. And they are. And I have amazing teams, and they do incredible work. And I trust them to love every single woman that we get to serve with the extravagant love of Christ. Like, I just know that they're doing that. And so part of me feels like I have done a lot of the work I was supposed to do. And now the transition for me is just seeing the bigger picture, that I want to see what Jesus said he came to give us in John 10:10. I came to give you life to the full. Mm-hmm. The enemy came to kill, steal, and destroy. And I feel like what I see is a lot of kill, steal, and destroy in people's lives, and I'm ready to see people living life to the full. Right. And that's kind of where I'm focused now.
What do you think are some of the main things that people allow to kill, steal, and destroy in their lives?
Well, I mean, this podcast may not be popular once I'm done, but I felt like as I was praying, I was supposed to speak the truth in love. And so this comes from a place of love, but I feel like if I don't just speak the truth, then I'm just wasting time on your podcast. I know where this is going. I feel like we have, we just got to go on an amazing trip to Italy. We were in Rome. And I mean, Rome was the height of civilization in its time, untouched. And I feel like that's kind of how we've been in the United States. And I feel like we're on the same path. Mm-hmm. I feel like we have entertained ourselves into gluttony in every form. Yeah. We overindulge in things that are material, things that don't last, things that are just a momentary entertainment. Yeah. Or I think we have lost our senses, truly. And that was one thing I remember talking to you, like being in such a beautiful place. We got to go to Florence and Venice and Rome, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, can you imagine every person that's battling addiction, if they were able to take the money they spent on that addiction and put it into a trip to Italy, then their life would be so, like, they would be eating the best food and seeing the most beautiful, architecture and scenery, and your senses could come alive. And I feel like we've been dulling ourselves so much that we're not even aware that we're not really alive anymore. Right.
Because and we're moving very quickly towards hedonism, which, if you don't know what hedonism is, kind of ancient philosophical terms, the good was something that was heavily debated, and different philosophical viewpoints are completely based around what is the good. As Christian believers, we believe that God is the ultimate good, right? There is no good apart from God, and anything that is good is from God, right? That's clearly stated in the Bible multiple times. Hedonists basically believe that their own appetites, the fulfillment of their appetites, pleasure, is the ultimate good, and that the purpose in life that everyone should run towards is ultimate pleasure, ultimate appetite fulfillment, which is actually a paradox because any addict knows that the harder you chase pleasure and the fulfilling of an appetite, the less pleasurable it becomes. The more you indulge in something, the less of a payoff you get from it. And so you could tell how that goes downhill very quickly. At a certain point, any behavior will break you down and turn you inside out eventually.
I have an example from my own life.
I can't wait to hear this. Wonderful.
I love dessert. I love it so much. Everyone that knows me knows I would much rather forego a meal in order to have dessert. And a while back, a few months ago, I went on this strict, I had a nutritionist that was kind of helping me look through, my diet, and she was really telling me what to eat, not eat. And it was a lot of work, I'm not going to lie. I only stuck with her for a few months because I was like, okay, thanks, but that was a lot. Anyway, but during that time, my friend Amelia, who also did this with me, God bless her. Hey, Amelia. We weren't having any sugar at all.
Yikes.
Until at nighttime, she would make this really healthy version of hot chocolate. And I'm telling you, because I had no sugar, I sat and indulged in every sip of that hot chocolate. It was like the best hot chocolate I'd ever had because it was rare. It was special. And I think, the more that we shop online and acquire things, the more that we look at pornography, the more that we drink another, drink, the more that we do that, the less enjoyment, the less special it actually is. And like you said, it just dulls our senses, and we are shells of ourselves walking around looking for the next hit.
Yep. You know what? I think that deprivation is actually one of the biggest keys to a fulfilling life or a fulfilling experience. Let me tell you about the best meal I've ever eaten, right? We'll go flip side opposite here. We had done a field training exercise for a few days, and the MREs or whatever, I had horrible luck. I picked the worst one every time. I think it was the spinach casserole or something. Just absolute barf. So I didn't eat the whole time, basically. Man, when I got dismissed, I drove as fast as I possibly could to the nearest Whataburger. If you're not from the South, you don't know what Whataburger is, look it up. It's amazing. Or at least it was on that day. It's fast food. It's whatever. But to this day, that's still the best meal I've ever had. I literally shed a tear eating that meal because I was so deprived of food. I had been dreaming about those fries for the past 48 hours and then finally getting to indulge in it, And I think that the biggest example of this, because we live in such an over-sexualized culture, is marriage. We're seeing so many more people having sexual problems in the midst of marriage because they never implemented deprivation once in their lives. These guys have been, self-fulfilling since an age of 5, 6, 7 years old. They've been doing that longer than they haven't, right? And so deprivation at first, which feels so painful, leads to the ultimate fulfillment of the marriage covenant and intimacy, right? You cannot experience, and I'll say this right now, unless God intervenes, you will not experience the true fulfillment of everything that God's version of intimacy has to offer if you never deprive yourself in singleness. If you never fight that fight. I'm about to make a video right now about things that you should do as a man to prepare for marriage while you're still single. Because some things you can't prepare for, right? Marriage hits you like a train and you just got to figure it out as you go. But one of the biggest things is getting pure and staying pure for an extended period of time. And that's not just from pornography, because that's the only thing that we hear about in sermons is pornography, but we never hear about masturbation. We never hear about true sexual deprivation. And we have this big old debate over, is it a sin or not? It's a sin. I'll make a video on that too. Don't test me. All right. It's a sin. But if you never fight that fight, if you never climb that hill, you don't really experience the fullness of what intimacy has to offer. That's coming from somebody that's not married. As somebody that is married, is it true? Is it true?
Yeah. Yeah.
There we go.
Well, I was married, my first marriage, I got married at 18. I was married for 23 years and found myself single in my 40s. So that was like a whole new world. And one of the things that was important to me, and this is me, I'm not putting this on anyone else, it was just my walk with the Lord at that time, was to, for a while, for a season, it was to not even watch the romance comedies or the, just to truly let the Lord kind of just clear some space out in my heart and my mind and my soul. Because if we want what he has for us, and we're putting so many images of what that's supposed to look like, or I'll just fulfill myself, or I don't want to have to wait. And, all these things, then we're not giving him space to even create in us the longing for what he wants to give us. And we may settle for something that's not really him if we don't really give him room. And so I know that's a little different because I'm a girl, but it was even to go to that place of not even entertaining that part of me. And it kind of makes me think about in Song of Solomon when they kept saying, like, don't awaken love before it's time. And I think that's part of it, is that when we awaken that longing, but it's not submitted to the Lord, then we're kind of wild and we're putting ourselves in a dangerous position sometimes.
Yeah.
So
at that point, you're operating in a completely different appetite than what the Lord designed for intimacy. And yes, the marriage bed is undefiled. You can't even pick that apart theologically. It says it in there, but there is a big difference between an appetite for true, genuine intimacy and an appetite for lust. And you can ask any therapist this. You can use your partner to fulfill that appetite of lust. You can absolutely do that, even with a spouse. That is not something that is something that lies within your own heart that you need to check. So another thing, that's if you haven't deprived yourself in a season of singleness, then you're going to have to fight that fight. Is this lust or is this a true, genuine desire for intimacy that actually glorifies the Lord, right? And we were talking about kind of the fulfilling nature of longing. And there was a poem by, I think, Khalil Gibran, who I don't agree with all his views, but this is a beautiful poem. In it, he said, I have heard the voice of those who are satisfied, the most wretched of people. But I have heard the sigh of those in yearning and longing, and it is sweeter than the sweetest melody. And I think there's just something so special about resting and just sitting in that uncomfortable space of wanting something so bad, wanting that deep emotional tie of love and commitment and relational safety to such an extreme degree that it hurts. I think there's something so beautiful about that. And this kind of hedonistic social media culture that we've created around ourselves to comfort ourselves from our loneliness blocks us from ever experiencing that, but it's one of the most fulfilling experiences. I still remember when I first kind of started on my journey of following the Lord vigorously, like I want to be a man of God, right? After I hit rock bottom, I was working a night shift for like 6 months at a church, by the way. It was a security type position, so I would check in with people once every hour or so. But between that time, I wasn't doing a whole lot. And I think I had a flip phone at the time, and so no real connection to the outside world. I was truly, genuinely alone, except I had one other security guard that was there that I would see a couple times a night. Love that guy. I wonder if he's going to watch this. That would be hilarious. But I was truly, genuinely alone, and I actually miss those nights. I miss those lonely nights because I was in the presence of God. That church was a very spirit-filled church. I mean, his presence rested there. And I just sat in it, alone but not alone, and knowing that God knew the desires of my heart, and even proclaiming those to him, but still in a situation of loneliness and feeling that yearning and that longing and that desire for something so good that he created and said was good. That was a very special time of my life. And, I'm sad for guys that never experienced that.
I think too, just, I remember this story. It was actually Lisa Bevere, and she was talking about one of her sons when he was young. I don't remember which one, but I remember the story. And they were at a checkout at a grocery store. And he was seeing the covers of the magazines, which they all have women, on the covers. And he looked at the face of this woman and he goes, "Mommy, she looks like she wants to eat me." That is like the best description of what lust feels like.
Yeah.
And it's the complete opposite when my husband looks at me and he's cherishing me. Like he wants to take care of me and love me and pour into me and give to me. Whereas lust is just about taking something.
You know what's so funny about that? You say that. I read this morning in Proverbs 30, I forget which verse exactly it was, but it says, an adulterous woman consumes a man and then asks what's wrong with that. That's so funny that even a kid picked apart. It looks like she wants to eat me. She does. Run.
See the difference, but he saw that look, and that's what they wanted all the women on the magazine covers to portray.
Yes.
And so I thought that was such a good way of distinguishing between lust and intimacy.
Yep.
It's now it is tangibly a different experience. And, I'm 48 now. I don't know when this podcast is going to be out, but currently when we're filming this,
hopefully it doesn't take a year.
I'm 48. and there are times when there are still going to be men that give me looks that make me feel like queasy almost, because it's a look of they're taking something from me. And that's what it feels like. Or there's something that I feel like I just want to say, I didn't give you permission to do that. Whatever you just did.
Yeah.
And we feel those things from people because there's an exchange that's happening.
Right.
Versus when I'm in the presence of men that make me feel safe. And I think for men, I have the honor of being around some of the most amazing men, and I love them, I respect and honor them so much, and they have the ability to make women feel safe. And it's not just about physical safety.
Right.
But when men do the work of dealing with the things that have, tried to hold them back, when they've dealt with those things, they become safe for us emotionally. They become safe for us in every way.
Right.
And it's a completely different feeling. And I love when Paul talks about, he's trying to train up younger men. I think he's talking to Timothy. It's one of the letters to Timothy. And he says, look, it's real simple. Treat older women like they're your mother. Treat younger women like they're your sister. Like, that's how we handle things in the body of Christ, Yeah. And then there's a purity to how we interact and see each other. And there's a freedom then to offer to each other encouragement and, even brotherly and sisterly affection, to be able to give each other hugs and not be afraid. Because I think part of what we've done in Christianity is like, separate the two, and they should never, come together. And
awkward side hugs. Very
awkward side hugs. And we've deprived ourselves a bit because we didn't just operate in what Paul made real simple.
Right.
And then, of course, what the world offers becomes appetizing because there's no pure expression of connection and intimacy within the body of Christ.
Yeah. And this is something the body of Christ has absolutely failed on. When you lack virtue, you subsidize it with rules.
Yeah.
So when the men lack the virtue to go through that very painful process of purity to move, and I'll explain that process and how the way you perceive women changes throughout it. But when you refuse to do that, what do you have to do? You have to set up rules. You have to treat yourself like a 10, 11, 12-year-old. And that in that moment is the right thing to do, but it's sad nonetheless, because then you see the almost cult-like behavior of churches, where it's like, you can't look at a woman at all. You can't go near women. Like, if you go on a date, there has to be like a chaperone there. Like, and there's full denominations that embrace that kind of behavior. And it's like, how about we build virtue? How about we build character? Because whenever it gets outside of the safety of your rules and the infrastructure that you created, then what? How does their character hold up then, right? But there's and I understand churches have given up on young men going through this process because it's a painful process. It's a difficult process, but I'll tell you what happens in it. You start off as probably someone who's most likely addicted to porn, which 80% of men are. Those stats change every day. Right now, it's around 80, between 75 and 85. You start off with full-on objectification. And we don't even like those words in the church, right? We think that that's just like liberal. No. When you see a woman, you see a collection of body parts, and you most likely just see the ones that are able to bring you pleasure. That's where you start off. That's where most men are starting off right now. Then, as you pursue Christ, as you begin to develop a personal relationship with him, maybe you read your Bible every day, all those behaviors start to culminate together. You start to notice other parts of a woman's appearance. You think to yourself, oh, wow, she has really pretty eyes. Or, she has a nice smile. Still kind of objectifying, right? It's just parts of her body, but it's moving further and further away from that kind of selfish nature of how you view a woman. You move on that process a little bit longer. Maybe you start to serve others. You begin to see your identity as a son of God, and you want to be about your Father's business rather than just living for yourself. Well, then you begin to notice personality traits. You begin to think, wow, she is really empathetic towards others. She really cares about others. She's really funny, right? She's very easy to be around and easy to talk to. I'll tell you right now, a man that's watching pornography will not notice those things about you, ladies. He won't care. He won't appreciate that. He physically can't. His mind has not gone through the refining process to even be able to appreciate those things about you. But a man that's gone through the process of purity can. You move along a little bit further. All you see is God in them. All you see is the piece of him that he had to deposit inside of that one amazing woman. Because guess what? God's personality is so big that he needed billions of people throughout thousands and thousands of years just to reflect a glimpse of his personality. He's placed a little bit of himself inside of all of us. That does not mean that we're God or that we're equal to him whatsoever, not even close. But he made us in his image. He loves for his creation to reflect his own nature. He's a creator. And so you begin to see that in women. And then, and only then, are you truly able to love a woman. And I'll tell you, that's a difficult process. But like you said, even in embracing all of your senses, you live life to such a full extent that you never would have thought possible if you have the courage to take that step. And it's a difficult one. And for a while, you have to treat yourself like a 10-year-old. It's just the reality of it. But I wonder what would happen if every man that claims Christ Jesus as his Lord and Savior decided, you know what, I am not going to stop until I've come through that gambit. Like, what would the church look like, Oh,
yeah. It would be a free church.
Yeah.
Right now, so much of the people in the pews are in bondage personally. And so there's this inner conflict constantly of what we need is the presence of God more than anything to heal us and to transform us, to tell us who we are. But the fear of going into his presence because of the shame and the guilt, it's like that's the struggle that I feel like is happening in so many people. And I believe it is because we've mixed the gospel with the law, and Jesus fulfilled the law. Now what's left is we're under grace, and that scares people, which I'm so grateful this is the time I was born and not under the law. Yep. I'm so grateful that this is when I'm on the planet, but it's that mindset. It's a mixed mindset of still trying to do it on our own and our own power and strength versus just truly accepting that he said, I have torn the veil between us. You have access to me now. I'm not rejecting you. There's nothing that could come between us. Not heights, not depths, not angels, not demons, like nothing can come between us now. And that's, to me, getting in his presence, which is what you were doing every night and being alone. Yeah. Being in his presence is what sets us free. He is the truth. He's the only source of truth. That's the only thing that's going to set us free. And so I feel like we're we're still teetering between law and grace, and we cannot mature into what you're talking about without fully embracing grace. Like we just have to, because we can't do this without it. We may linger up to the throne room and keep our distance, but we won't go all the way in with him if we still feel like I still have to get my stuff worked out. Yep. And it's truly his presence, the power of the Holy Spirit now working in our lives. The reason that you can see the Lord in these people and these women now is because the Holy Spirit is in you and is activated. And so I think that we, as a church, I think we show up with mixed lives. We show up with mixed theology. Yeah. And one of the words that you used earlier is undefiled. And that word, I made up my own definition. This isn't like in the Webster's dictionary. This is like Carrie's dictionary. Right. But the way that I see that word is that it's not mixed. There's no mingling. Right. That's undefiled. Yeah. Nothing is mixed in with it. It's pure. And so I believe that when we truly allow him to be everything he said he was going to be for us, our Savior, our Redeemer, our Restorer, everything, when we surrender and let him, then we can stand right back up because we're going to fall down. We're just human. We're going to fall down, but we can stand right back up and keep moving through those steps that you were talking about.
You know, what you just said kind of makes me, I'm very heartbroken for legalists. It's easy to make a legalistic Christian out to be the bad guy. But the fact of the matter is people are legalists for a number of reasons, but I think the most popular reason that people become very legalistic religious Christians is the fact that they love Jesus so much, they can't bear the thought of them being the reason for the wound in his side and his hands and the reason that he had to suffer. And so they need to create a law for them to fulfill so that they think, I didn't do that to Jesus. Yeah, he did. I did. And to embrace grace is to embrace the reality that every time you've ever messed up, every time you are messing up, every time you will mess up, that is the wound in his side. That is every painful breath that he had to take as splinters were going through his already chopped up back, right? Those are our mistakes that cultivated into the monumentous suffering that he had to go through. And I think that legalists just don't want to face that reality. So we have to create rules. We have to create laws, you know?
That makes a lot of sense. One thing that, I don't remember the chapter, but it's in the Old Testament. I want to say maybe Ezekiel. I'm making it up though. But it literally goes through and it's foreshadowing that journey that Christ made from, all the way through his suffering to the cross. And it talks about how he carried our sins and our transgressions. He carried all of it. So he is intimate with all of my suffering, all of my shame, all of my sin. He personally carried it. So while we were in Italy, I don't know how many times you personally carried my luggage for me, but it was a lot. Yeah. And it was heavy. Okay. You know the weight of that because you kept carrying it for me. He knows the weight of our sin and our pain and our hurt. He knows the weight of it because he personally carried every sin we committed and every sin committed against us. Yeah. He personally knows all of it. And I think so often we get stuck because maybe someone sinned against us or hurt us, or maybe we did something and we're feeling so much guilt and shame. And we either try to go tell somebody else like, hey, this is what he did to me, and we try to get comfort or something, validation or reassurance, or we go in ourselves and we try to just kind of resolve on our own. But the only person who was, first of all, a witness to every moment we've already been through. He was personally present. And he has already personally taken care of it for us. He's already paid for it. Why don't we run to him?
Right.
He's the only one that really understands and knows personally every bit of it. And I feel like that's where I just see Satan standing there like, no, don't go towards the light, because he knows, no, go here and here, distract yourself and take a drink and watch some porn and, all these other things, because in his presence, in an instant, I'm not saying it happens easily. I'm just saying in his presence, the process starts.
Yeah.
He's the only one. He's the only one that can make things right for us. Yeah. He's the only one that did. So I feel like that's one of the greatest strategies sometimes of the religious spirit, is to actually keep us away from just the presence of God. It's like, stay busy and do all these activities and try to earn, favor or whatever. And he's like when he cleared out the temple, I mean, he threw over tables and he got everything out of the way that was in between the people and the presence of God. And it says after he cleared out the temple, everyone who came was healed. So I think there's some temple.
Wow. You can mark me down. I did not realize that. That makes sense. The presence of God was able to come back in, because what he saw was, oh, my father's been evicted.
Yeah.
They've come in with their tricks and trinkets and their systems to produce a good Christian, right? And they've kicked him out in the process unknowingly. And so he kicked them out, made room for the homeowner to come back in. Golly, that's incredible. You know how awesome this conversation has been? I haven't even asked a single question that I had on my list. Okay. You're a better podcaster than you think.
Okay, great. There's hope.
I'm trying to get her to start her own podcast. It's in the works. So this is a great question. I've been waiting to ask this whole time. Okay. What do you think the greatest issue plaguing young women is in this modern day and age?
I think they're trying to prove themselves in so many ways. And instead of just looking at themselves in the mirror and going, this is who I am, and developing that person, I feel like there's so much pressure on young women to prove so much about themselves. And yeah, that's what I would say.
Like they're being forced into playing a broken game. Mm-hmm. It's like become worthy by this standard of, the bad bee or whatever. Yes. And in that process, lose your soul.
There's a few different personas that you can choose.
Right.
And it's very limiting. And then I feel like, it has to be some way filtered and improved upon. None of us get to just walk around being ourselves anymore, and I feel like, if I were 20 something years younger, 30 years younger, my gosh, it's just like a constant mind game of trying to figure out identity and value apart from all the messaging of the world of what we're supposed to be, and then trying to live up to that and prove something constantly.
And how much of the young female experience nowadays is completely predicated around making themselves attractive to men? Is because from the outside going in, it seems like that's like 80% of what being a female is seen as these days.
Or trying to prove that you don't need the approval of man.
Those are the only two ways you can go, huh?
It's like one or the other.
It's either screw men or I need men. There's no in between.
I need your attention.
Right.
I need your approval to make me feel validated, but then I have to be like, I don't need you. Yeah. It's a real strange dynamic between men and women from the women's perspective and the men's for sure. Right now, it's just a whole crazy show to watch from my perspective at my age. And at the same time, there is such a vulnerability, and I see an image. It's just like shakiness. And like I want young women to get to feel solid in who they are, to just own it and not feel like I said, like I've got to, I've got to figure out who I'm supposed to be today and what am I supposed to be wearing now and how am I supposed to, but just literally be able to look yourself in the mirror and be like, that's me. That's me,
And you have to stop pretending to do that, right? Because there's one thing to pretend that you're perfect and that your flaws are perfect, which is delusion, right? And there's another thing to accept that and be like, okay, I take on the responsibility of alleviating the flaws that might hinder my life in the future, but I have to accept that this is the reality of where I'm at first in order to do that, right? Like you have no ground to build anything on if you don't understand exactly where you're at. That was a very difficult thing for me to do because I had all these insecurities, and that word gets thrown around a lot, right? And I was like, okay, objectively speaking, what kind of man do I want to be, right? What's the idealized version of the man, not the man that Hollywood would want me to be or that society would want me to be, and forget all that crap. Who would I be able to look in the mirror and then go lay my head on my pillow at night and say, I'm a good man? What would that look like? And then I wrote down all the things that were in my life and that were a part of my character and my physicality, my mentality, my emotionality, all of those things that antagonized that guy. And I began checking them off, getting him out of my life. And I'm, obviously still in that process. I'm far from the person that I want to be, but I think that it takes a lot of self-awareness and a degree of self-acceptance to even do that, which is so different from what we hear about self-acceptance these days, because that the voice of self-acceptance now is you just have to accept where you're at and be okay with that. It's like, no, well, I can accept that this is where I'm at, but I don't have to stay here,
I don't think we can make any positive change in our lives from a place of criticality or without peace. I think it's shaky. I think it's not sustainable. And so there are things in my life that I'm constantly, still want to work towards and become. But at the same time, I'm not going to let that rob me of enjoying my life today and where I am today and appreciating it. And this is another part of my story that we didn't go into, but at 32, I had cancer, and that changed me forever. For the rest of my life, I live differently than I did before I had cancer. And so that was the catalyst that made me realize every day I get to live is a gift. Yeah. I got to see my kids grow up. I got to be here for it. I don't take my life for granted. Right. And I don't waste time because I don't assume that I'm going to always have it. And all of that to say, there's something about being able to get on with living that can only come when you just get to a place of peace. Like I'm okay with where I am right now. I have a lot of goals and I'm excited about them, but there's a difference between feeling the need to constantly improve or change or fix something versus the energy that comes from getting to create something.
At that point, then your goals don't drain the life out of you, you know?
It's exciting. I'm getting to create a lifestyle that includes things that make me feel good. I'm creating, when you come from a place of I'm creating a life that I love versus I have to fix something that's broken, like that's not fun. So I just think that start with where you are and be like, this is who I literally am today. And I'm at peace with where I am because you know what? I came through a lot of stuff. I'm still here. I hadn't died yet. Like, life is at that, and start there and then think, what kind of life do I get to create now?
Yeah. That's beautiful. I want to speak just before we move on, because we're going to move on to some of the stuff that you talk about in your programs. We're not going to give it all away, so you got to buy it, you cheapskates, right? But I want to speak really, really quick on beauty standards, because I feel like that's something that we kind of talked around or whatever. I just want to hit it real quick and give you an opportunity to hit it as well. I don't know who created beauty standards of like the Victoria's Secret model or whatever, but it wasn't men, or at least it wasn't good men that you would want to be with anyways. A good man, and you know exactly what I'm going to say. A good man, let me tell you the only beauty standard that a good man has. You look like... This is the only beauty standard that a good man has. You look like you smell good. That's it. That's it. If a man can look at you and think to himself, wow, she probably smells really good, doesn't she? That's it. That's all you need. You do not need to. And you know, the funny thing about beauty standards, right, is they get mad at the the fitness models or whatever that just work out really hard and take care of themselves, or the Hollywood actresses that work hard and take care of themselves. You know who they should be mad at? They should be mad at the porn industry, and they should be mad at the bodily augmentation industry. I'm just going to say that. Those, and you know what's so funny? The same people that will cry about beauty standards revere and champion those two occupations or those two industries. When in reality, pornography is the only thing skewing a male's standard of what he wants physically from a woman. That's the only thing. Hollywood is not doing that. It's the pornography industry. And bodily augmentation, that's like the equivalent of men on steroids for guys. You physically cannot reach that level as a woman. You can't do it. It requires augmentation that's actually possibly very harmful for your body, possibly very harmful for your health, very risky. It's a surgical operation, right? Those two things are championed by the same people that cry about body standards. And those are the only two things that are deprecating the mentalities of women every single day and having a true negative effect on them. So all that to say, I don't think feminists know what they want, or if they do know what they want, they don't know how to get it. They kind of suck at it. But anyways, what's your take on body standards after that whole rambling mess?
I am so grateful. I have to give a shout out to my friend Tracy, because when I was probably 30 and she was 40, she's exactly 10 years older than me. Or maybe I was like 26 and she was 36, somewhere in that range. We made a pact with each other that we would never have any kind of surgeries to augment our bodies in any way. Nothing. No needles going into our little foreheads. Like,
not even the lips.
Nothing. No lips. Nothing. We made a pact. And you know, since that time, both of us are more wrinkly and we're a little bit more saggy. She's still stunning. I mean, she's gorgeous. But you know what? Every time I meet with her and I look at her and we're both just growing old as God designed our bodies to do, it's refreshing.
Happy as can be, huh?
It's refreshing to sit with another woman who's just doing what she's designed to do, which is to grow older. And I think that, this is something that I think is kind of unique to our society. I haven't really studied a lot of different cultures, but it's kind of sad to me that I knew so many young women in their 20s that were already having surgeries, and I would babysit their kids while they're in the hospitals and recovering, and I just thought, oh my gosh, like, you're so beautiful right now. Like, you have no idea, like, you're going to be my age. you have no idea, like, you're already trying to fix something that's already super perfect.
Right.
And so our whole mindset towards this is just off the rails as far as I can tell. And I can't even, like, this is just my perspective, but the more surgeries that women have, the less they look warm, and it's not a judgment, because it's every person is managing their lives the best that they can and what they're feeling about themselves. So I have no judgment at all about it. It's just the feeling of I just feel like it's a struggle for us to feel like we have to measure up to something. And then I feel like every time we go under the knife or we do something to our own bodies, I feel like I think it takes a toll mentally and emotionally in how we see ourselves. I don't necessarily know that it makes us feel what we hope it's going to make us feel. But I've never done it, so who am I to say anything? Yeah. I'm over here with Tracy going, we're getting wrinkly.
Getting wrinkly and happy, let's go.
So I don't know. But I just hate that there's a pressure. And again, why do we all have to look the same?
That's true.
Like,
it's
why does
like
everyone have to have poofier lips? And why does everyone have to, like, why do we all have to look the same?
Yeah, and the aesthetic look that has been like considered most desirable by society has changed so much in the past 100 years, right?
Like Marilyn Monroe, and she was a little more voluptuous. Then you had Twiggy, who was like a little stick person, and it's always changing. So you can have the surgery and then 10 years be like, oh no, you mean I'm not supposed to look like Kim Kardashian anymore? I'm supposed to have like a flat butt? Oh no.
You know what hasn't changed though in all those times?
What?
Smelling good, being attractive.
Like she smells good.
Smelling good has always been an
attractive thing and will always be an attractive thing to the end of time. What was the most like expensive thing you could get in biblical times? It was like a commodity, right? It was all the oils and the beauty products, the fragrances that smelled so good, the incense, everything, right? If you create an environment that smells good or you create a persona that smells good, it's always going to be attractive.
I hate that my husband's very allergic to all of my smelly good candles. I'm trying to look like I smell good, okay?
I mean, he's allergic to dogs too, and you have
I know,
a dog,
we do have dogs, so he's just
loves
coping.
on him so much, knowing that it's just going to
make him all, yep.
It's true love right there. Let's flip the gender script, right? We talked about the main thing plaguing young women. What do you think? Because you've worked with a lot of men, as you've said as well. You've had the opportunity to work with some amazing, godly, strong, masculine men. What do you think the biggest issue plaguing young men in our society is now?
I think out of all the options in the world, the thing I would most struggle to be right now in our world would be a young man.
Really?
Yeah. I think young men are under attack more than I would say any other genre. I have watched over my lifetime a progression of the role of men and the view of men has just shifted so hard in my lifetime. Right. And I know I've shared this with you, but as I was growing up, we watched shows like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best and Little House on the Prairie, and the dad was always a good man, and he took care of his family and those kind of things. And it shifted, and you had The Simpsons, and you had like these portrayals of men shifted to where they were just kind of dumb, and they just sort of sat there, and they had beer bellies, and they were the joke of the show. And then it shifted again to where every sitcom, kind of the star of the show was the gay guy.
Right.
And I've just watched this over my lifetime, and I'm going, what is happening? Like, what is that? And is there something that has come in, a specific attack on men to rob them of feeling capable, of feeling valuable just to be a man anymore? Significant. Like, I just feel like that something has come to strip men of their place and their value. And so being a young man navigating right now, I can't even fathom how hard that would be. I think that when I look at men, I have seen men be pretty much demonized in the work that I do. When you work with sex traffic victims, what's the problem? The problem is men.
Yeah.
Men are purchasing women and children. Men are driving that demand. Men are selling. They're primarily The pimps and the traffickers are still primarily male. The problem is men.
Right.
Like, that's what I look at all day, every day.
Right.
Okay. Then I work with a team of men who will risk their lives. They would die to protect and to rescue one of these women or children out of that situation. So then I see men are amazing. And there's this conflict that I've seen in the portrayal of men, where they're demonized, they're the heroes, and it's like this, it's just such a contradiction.
Yeah.
And then I feel like even being masculine or being a man has been so shot down, and I think it would be really confusing overall to be a young man right now and to feel like, am I just wrong for existing as a male on the planet? Like, I didn't really, I didn't form myself and choose these body parts in my mother's womb. Like, I came this way.
Certainly not going to choose my gender now.
Right. Like, here I am.
Yeah.
And yet the escapism from being associated with the problem aspect of it. And that's why I tell men all the time, like, you've been told you're the problem, but you're actually the solution. You actually are, because when men operate in their design, they were created in the image of God to be protectors and defenders.
I remember you doing a training one time at a church and talking about the sex trafficking industry, and you had talked a little bit about how pornography feeds that industry in such a tactile, direct way, and you could just see men's faces start going down. Because, every single one of them at one point or another had contributed to this evil, the same evil that's going to be after and predatory towards their own daughters. They've contributed to that, right? And when you said, men, you are not the problem, you're the solution. How they stood up, they sat up straight, they put their heads up, and they were like, I can do something. I can be a part of something that would, make the people around me proud, right? That can make myself proud. That would, again, allow me that opportunity to lay my head on my pillow and think to myself, you know what? I was a good man today. I think I'll be him again tomorrow, right? Nothing can match that feeling. And to even give a man the hope of getting there, to even show him a picture of what heroism is like. You know why those Lord of the Rings movies were so popular and did so well? Because they just let heroes be heroes. When you look at Aragorn, right, leading like 1% of the opposing army, straight into the Black Gates for his friend, no fear on his face, pure heroism. You know why every single man cried? Because, it's that same exact feeling. It's like, wow, what does a good man look like? Guys are craving that so much because they're being told 1,000 different blueprints for what a man is supposed to be, who a man is supposed to be. And what they're realizing is, I don't want to be that. 90% of men do not want to be the men that are portrayed in movies, on TV, on social media. They don't want to be that guy. They don't want to be the tolerant, harmless, domesticated house cat. They don't want to be that. They want to be dangerous. They want to have some sort of capacity for evil, because if your capacity for good is directly correlated to your capacity for evil, and therein lies the choice of virtue. And we had a whole debate. There was like this. I was homeschooled, right? I went to this co-op, and we would have these philosophy classes, and we would literally just debate on one subject the entire year. And 1 year it was, what is virtue? And we decided it was the capacity for evil, but the choice to do good. And you look at what feminism has done to men. And to be honest, if you look at feminists and someone like myself, we have the same goal. Our goal is to eliminate tyranny in the world. We want to see the bad guys unseated, and we want to see both men and women live equally fulfilling lives. But the question therein lies, how do you get rid of tyranny? And there's two main ways that you can get rid of tyranny, and this is where our paths divulge. 1, disarmament, or 2, contention. right? You want to get rid of a tyrant, you can either disarm anybody that shares any similar characteristic with him and wait for him to die out, or two, you can arm people to contend with that tyrant. And this is what feminism looks like. It looks like disarmament. They want to disarm men of everything that gives them the capacity for evil, but at what cost? They want to deprive them of the agency to do wrong, right?
I think if men, and this is a very simple example of what I think you're talking about. Me as a woman, if I have to, say I had dinner with my friend and I have to, we stayed out late. I'm trying to get to my car. It's in a dark alley. It's 11:30 at night and I have to get to my vehicle. Walking down that dark alley, all of a sudden, a large, shadowy figure starts coming my direction, and I realize it's a man. As a woman, my first feeling is fear and panic.
Right.
Because of my past experiences with things that have happened to me from men. But if that man chooses to be a safe, protective presence for me, he can represent something completely the opposite. He could alleviate my fear and my panic with just his presence.
Right.
And that's what I don't know that men understand. They can represent our greatest fear and threat or our greatest sense of protection and safety. Y'all have that power.
Right.
Because, and maybe women are going to get really mad for me saying this, but it's just my personal experiences that I'm weaker. Dang it. I just am. I even went to a self-defense class one time when you were a teenager and I came home trying to use my techniques and you were already able to defeat me. And I was like, well, crap. And these were taught by like police officers.
Right.
So there's just something that I think that, if women that have ended up in that mindset, they have a story of why they have that feeling now, and it's because there was a man or multiple that created the fear instead of the safety. And until men use their strength in a way that makes us feel safe, there's that in every single woman. We will feel threatened or fearful if we're in a situation where we don't know what to expect. And so I feel like if every man knew that every encounter they have with a woman, they could be creating a different message for her, one where they're safe, they protect her, they're looking out for her. Maybe he stands guard to make sure she gets to her car safe, and says, hey, I know, you're just trying to get to your vehicle. I'm just going to stand here for a second, make sure you get there safe. And he keeps a distance from her, but she knows he's not going to harm her. I mean, there's ways that you could start flipping the script on what maybe some of us have endured or experienced at the hands of men that weren't, safe. And you have those opportunities. And I would say there's a lot of women that may not know how to receive that. They may full-blown reject it, or they may scoff, or they may not know how to respond because of what their experiences have been. But I just think if men are willing to understand that there's probably, you look at the stats now are that 2/3 of us were molested and sexually abused. There's probably a good reason why we struggle sometimes. And I think, for women, it's just, can you give them a chance and just let yourself be open to see that maybe there's some amazing men. I happen to know a lot of them that they would never use their strength to harm someone. They would only use it to protect.
Yeah.
It'll start mending, I think, some of those messages that we keep living with. And I would say for men as well, I think a lot of men have experienced such harshness and judgment from women that they don't want to put themselves out there anymore. Like, why would I risk trying to do something for you when I mean, I just think we've created this, and we've got to, destroy that and rebuild something new.
Yeah, we've successfully created a non-working social dynamic.
Yes.
And I think when you were talking about men that choose to use their strength for good, I think that that's the epitome of where a father comes in. And again, this is the approach of contention, right? When I was probably like 5 or 6 or something. I remember the first time I talked back to you. I was a brat that day. I decided, you know what? I've learned I can communicate well, right? I have some agency. I can run really fast now, right? I have some physical ability. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to sass off to my mom. And I remember, you didn't say a whole lot. You waited for dad to come home. And I remember what he said to me. He said, don't you ever disrespect my wife again. At that point, you weren't mom. It wasn't mommy. It was my wife. So you learned 2 lessons there. One of them's obvious, right? Don't disrespect a guy's wife. That's the obvious lesson. The second lesson is, hey, the moment you gain some agency, some strength, some ability, and you decide to use it to be a tyrannical jerk to another person, guess what? You're going to be met with contention. Good men are not just going to sit by and allow you to use your ability to do ill towards others. And that is the language of masculinity, is contention, right? And so when you're talking about men finally understanding, hey, you have an opportunity to flip the script, it first comes with, okay, if I don't already, how do I develop agency and ability to do both evil and good? And then how do I develop the character to choose good every time? And for so many men that never had a father, they never got taught that lesson. And if there are any fathers listening to this, make sure that the lesson of contention is taught at a very young age. As soon as your son begins to get some moxie about him, some physical ability, some strength, or even just an ability to communicate effectively and articulate his thoughts very well, that lesson of, hey, you cannot just use people. You cannot manipulate people. You cannot enact your will on another person without being met with fierce contention. That's how wars are started, right? Somebody decides to do something to someone that has no ability to stop them, and then Big Brother comes along and says, okay, yeah, you're not going to do that. It's the language of contention. So we can either choose to disarm men and make them harmless, but we also lose their ability to do any good. We lose their ability to even have an opportunity to flip the script. That man, if he's harmless walking down that dark alley, then, well, you don't necessarily feel in danger, but you don't feel safe either. He's just harmless. And so, the question is, would you rather feel safety in a dangerous world, or would you rather feel nothing in a world with no danger or safety?
I have one last real life example.
I'm ready. Let me hear it.
So when I was in Iraq, it was still in the midst of, ISIS control. So just to get to the camps, I had a 4-hour ride in a van going through multiple checkpoints, and you never knew who was in control of those checkpoints, right, if it was military or so it was just, everything was risky at that time. And so every morning I had a briefing with the security guy that was with me on each trip. And I would sit over breakfast, and they would give me, here's your flare, here's your burner phone, like here's all your stuff. And I had to put it in different places, even. They told me where to store everything. And then I had at each checkpoint, if something went bad, this is your escape route, and I would have to say it back. It was so much that went into just getting to the camp.
Yeah.
And that wasn't even, then there's the risk involved in when you're in the camp.
Right.
And so all of this time, every single plan was built around, and if something goes bad, if they attack, these men will fight. You get to the safe place. There was never a scenario where I was going to stand and fight and they were all going to run to safety. Yeah. It was just, that was never the scenario. It was men who were willing to put their lives at risk for me. I was the liability.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't the asset that could protect everyone else. I was the liability. I was very aware of that. And that to me is just a real life example of when the rubber hits the road, they're not putting me up to fight for them.
Yeah.
They're like, get to safety, get behind us. We'll fight for you.
Yeah.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah. I remember I saw that.
Feel protected.
Yeah. I saw that echoed that whole, cause the same men that were on that team were the ones training us for the transport team. And we did a scenario where the car had been ambushed and there were shooters and we had a contact front. And, obviously we got behind the engine block, got the advocate and the victim out, and it was a leapfrog maneuver back to the nearest cover. And, one person would be responsible for both the advocate and the victim. And the briefing on that was basically, okay, look, you're going to get up and you're going to run to the nearest cover. And, during the leapfrog maneuver, you have to stop at least once so that your buddy can run back, that he has enough time, right? And you have to cover him while he does that. But you're out in the open in that scenario. And so they basically told us, look, in this case scenario, you better hope that your buddy gives you good cover, first of all, and that you're able to get to a good place before he runs out of ammunition. And two, you're a human shield. So if you get hit, you'll probably take a hit. In this unlikely case scenario, right, you'll probably take a hit, and you've got to keep fighting. Because if you go down, they don't have a human shield anymore, and they're going to go too. And that whole mentality of, and I think that's what really makes men dangerous and virtuous, when we realize that to a degree, I don't want to say we're expendable, but our worth isn't just contingent even on us being alive. That even, our ability to lay down our lives and it be okay, and for a society to move forward. Because if a society loses all its women and children, they have no future. A society can lose a third of its men and they'll be okay. And I think that that's what makes us dangerous, and that's what gives us an opportunity to really show the foremost apex of our virtue, is when we're willing to go there, right? And I saw that mentality in those guys, and did my best to adopt it, because I was like 20 years old at the time. I was like, I got a lot of life to live. I'm not even married yet, but okay, I'll be a human shield, fine. Right? It's weird being asked to be a human shield at 20 years old. You're like, you realize I've never been married, right? Like, I got a lot to do here. Can I be the guy covering the human shield? But I think seeing that, when you see that in men, you can't unsee it. And that this kind of pessimism that's kind of come over our society like a cloud begins to dissipate as far as our perception of men, Like, I'm assuming you see men very differently than you did before your trips to Iraq.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. I needed to see that side of men, because my experience with men up to that point had not been with good men. And so I had been through quite a bit of abuse and, things that had happened because of the men I had been around. But one thing I want to encourage young men in, I hope this is encouraging, is that when you look back in history, I would say the two most dangerous men ever to land on the planet, when they were just infants, kings tried to have them killed as babies.
Yeah.
Wiped out quite a bit of male population trying to destroy Moses and Jesus.
Right.
So I see right now men are under attack. And I think it's because what's going to rise up, and hopefully this younger generation, is going to be a revolution again for manhood. And when those things happen, you see the resistance.
Yeah.
And it comes from places of power and authority, just like it did in the time of Moses and Jesus. But here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are today.
What's so funny about you saying that is, as this whole mass disdain towards men has grown, you know what else has grown? Male self-improvement space has grown exponentially. And so what you see is men being told they're one thing, and their response to that isn't necessarily to go crawl in a hole and die and, linger in hopelessness. Some men are there, and, we try to get those guys out of there, but most men have responded by saying, you know what? I may not be that, but I don't want to be what I am. I want to be the best possible version of myself that I can be. And for the Christian man especially, that comes in realizing that God's ultimate design, living in that reality, his apex design for you is the way that you can glorify him the most. Because God is a creator, first and foremost. That's the first thing that he did as God that we know about, was he created. And what can glorify a creator more than his creation operating exactly the way it's supposed to? And Christian men are realizing this, and they're saying, you know what, I can glorify God like this a little bit, but imagine how much glory I can bring God if I just fight this fight and decide that I want to become everything, every ounce of everything that he designed me to be. And you're seeing more and more men come out and say their biggest fear is standing before God and listening as he lists off all of the things that they were supposed to be, that they were supposed to do, all the plans that he had for them, and seeing just how much they had fallen short, right? I don't think any guy wants to experience that. And so, even though we're seeing such a hatred towards men, we're seeing men begin to respond in the most virtuous way possible. So I think that's great. Okay, we've talked a long time. I want to rattle off some quick things real quick. I don't know how many of my videos you watch.
As many as I can. I don't have TikTok, so I have to watch. Well, I think you got banned.
No, I got back. I got banned twice, actually. Oh, okay. I'm 2-0 on appeals. I write some nasty appeal letters, by the way.
I do see you on YouTube.
There you go. Okay. So I have this series, 2 series, right? One of them is called Green Flag, Red Flag, and another one is called Christian Dating Rules. So I'm going to ask you to rattle off, first of all, some green flags for a godly man, for all the young ladies out there that are wanting to be pursued by a godly man or whatever. What does that look like? Give me some green flags.
Okay, if you're looking for a good man, we need green flags. All right. First of all, I would evaluate truly, does he have his own personal relationship with God? Not does he go to church, but does he really walk it out? That would be a green flag if he does. Second would be evaluate his relationships and just kind of see, does he surround himself with healthy people? Does he have healthy relationships with his family? And I would say another one would be, is he ambitious? Does he have a plan? Does he have goals? And is he working towards them? Not just like, he's like got his head in the clouds and nothing is actually happening or manifesting from it, but is he working towards that? And lastly, what is his relationship like with money?
Ooh, see, I haven't even talked about that one yet, but there's a lot you can say on that one.
If he is, he has the ability to manage his finances in a responsible way, but he also will take the time to invest in things that are significant and important. And you just seeing his relationship, is he generous to other people?
That's a big one.
Those are things that I would look for.
Awesome.
And lastly, this is the most important. This is actually why I picked my husband, why I married him.
Alrighty.
How he treated other people.
Yeah.
Everywhere I saw him interacting with people all around the world, because we traveled all over the world, he treated everyone the same. Mm-hmm. That was why I fell in love with him, honestly, because of how he treated people.
Wow.
That's a big green.
Beautiful. Green flag. Yeah, green flag. All right. So we won't move to the red flags just yet. Let's do green flags for a godly woman. What should the fellas be looking for?
Godly woman, I would say again, is she truly about the Lord? There's real evidence. It's not just I'm a Christian, but there's no substance to it.
Yeah.
Check that out and make sure. How does she interact with other guys? I think that's a big thing. Is she
dilly?
Dilly. Does she need attention? Is she flirty? Those are signs again that there's something, that there's an insecurity or something that she's trying to feed that is beyond you. is she like gossipy and she looks for the bad in people, or does she always seem to be positive and she looks for the good in people? Yeah. If she's that kind of girl that's looking for the best in people, she's not like excited about gossip and slander, that's a green flag. Yeah. And then I would just say, does she honor and respect people? When you go on a date, how does she treat the waiter or the waitress? Like, if she's kind and gracious, then that's, I think, would be a good sign that she's legitimately a kind person,
Beautiful.
Let's do red flags for a godly man.
Okay, so in other words, if there are these red flags, he's probably not a good godly man.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm still working on the title of these ones.
He is incapable of eye contact because he's always scanning the rest of your body or somebody else behind
that's a
you.
good one.
We know this, just so you know. If you cannot look at our eyeballs, we know. I'm like, excuse me, right here. That would be a red flag. I would say if he is like hot-tempered, like he's angry driving, he's angry at like the slightest thing. If he just has, if he's just very reactionary, like that's a red flag for me. Does he spend a significant amount of time playing video games?
Oh, thank God. That's one of the things I've gotten the most pushback on when I told guys to stop playing video games.
Okay, well, maybe it's because I'm your mother.
No.
I don't know. No. I just think that, I would prefer to be with a man that is like doing things that are real things. That's more attractive to me than someone that can win a video game.
Yeah. Forget Far Cry. I'm gonna go.
That's just me, though. It's a personal preference. So
yeah,
it's a personal preference.
That's a good personal preference. Don't you?
But that would be for B. That would be a red flag. I would say if he. This is just for longevity purposes. Oh, if he cannot maintain some level of cleanliness for his clothing, his car, and his place of where he lives.
Oh my gosh.
Then who do you think is going to be cleaning up or having to coexist with all that? So long term, he needs to have some level of cleanliness about him. He needs to look like he smells good and his car smells good and his house smells good. It all needs to smell good.
Guys, start buying candles.
They make some for men now. It's kind of cool. I like those. They're like leather and...
Funny you mentioned that because this video is sponsored by... No, I'm playing.
I'm playing. We don't have a candle sponsor just yet.
Beautiful. Okay. Red flags for a godly woman real quick.
Okay, red flags that she may not be a godly woman is when she opens up her mouth, what is coming out? Is she, again, is everything like her language, her topics of conversation, if it's like shallow and it's gossip or it's just F-bomb this and that.
Loose lips sink ships, relationships.
That would be one. Again, look at her social media. How does she portray herself?
Right.
Who are her friends? If she's got some skanky friends, it may not be a green light for her just because if she's doing evangelistic friendships or something, then, but I just say you can tell by who people associate with sometimes, like where they are. Do I need to come up?
No, I think that's good. Okay. You talked about skanky friends real quick, and I'm gonna piggyback off this real quick before we end this out because this is important. We have to stop pretending like locker room talk is only a guy thing, or that just lust-filled relationships as far as what you conversate about is only a guy thing. I used to think so. Like growing up, obviously I was homeschooled, pastor's kid. All my friends, we didn't talk about that stuff. We didn't talk like that. We obviously all at one point or another had problems with pornography and lust and things like that, but we never admitted it. We were certainly never proud of it. It was like one thing that you never wanted your buddy to ever find out, ever, because you were convinced that nobody else had that problem, right? But I remember thinking that women were like completely innocent, pure hearted, which is who they are at heart. That's who God intended them to be. So I had that perception of women. And I remember the first time I saw one of the girls only group chats for the first time. Oh my gosh, the things that were being said in that group chat. It was literally just a lust fest of girls sending pictures of guys that they'd want to bang back and forth, like just taking turns talking. Like they went into detail. It was like, dear Lord. And sure enough, any girl that I even entertained after that had some sort of similar friendship dynamic with her friends. And they put on this wonderful, like pure innocent persona or whatever. And then with their friends, it was full on like delinquency. So yeah, again, that's like, obviously that's a big thing with guys too. Locker room talk does exist. I didn't experience it, thankfully, but it's a thing. But we have to stop pretending like lust is a male only issue, or that even the objectification of the other sex is a male only issue. This street goes both ways. Anyways, let's move on. This is the final thing that we're going to do. Okay. Yeah, when you're in the locker room, you're all naked. Just shut up. Just shut up. Why would you even want to talk to your buddies in the locker room? It's the most uncomfortable place. I've only been there a few times, right? In homeschool sports, we didn't have locker rooms.
None of you look like you smoke right now.
Yeah. Played basketball for a little bit when I first went to college, and we had a locker room. And it was like, you didn't want to talk to anybody. If you spoke up to another dude and made eye contact when you're both there just naked in a towel, like, nah, dude. Nobody was hanging around you after that. Anyways, give us a few good Christian dating rules. Christian dating rules with Carrie Grace. Let's go.
Well, the rule word is throwing me.
Guidelines.
Yeah.
Best practices.
I think that I'm guessing you're talking about like younger people dating
younger
roles.
People that don't have a clue yet.
I mean, I think it depends on, what your goals are. If you're dating for marriage or you're
Well, it's Christian dating rules, so yeah.
Okay.
You're dating for marriage.
Okay.
That was actually one of the first rules I ever did.
I think first of all, there's nothing wrong with, it may take you a while to kind of figure out, like, I may enjoy the company of several different, guys or girls, but what would make the ideal mate for me for life is a whole different category. Like, I can enjoy hanging out with a lot of people. It doesn't mean I want to live with them and sleep next to them every day. And so
same.
I think that first of all is just to realize that discovery is a real part of this for yourself. And so I would just say one of the rules or guidelines would be, don't be so hard on yourself if it doesn't work out with someone, because you're having to figure this out. They're having to figure this out, and you may enjoy each other's company, but it's just not like a lifetime thing.
Yeah.
And so I would say try to end well and have a friendship. Like, it doesn't have to be this dramatic, terrible thing. It could be that the people that you spend time with end up being part of just a healthy experience. I believe that you could both be a blessing to each other, and there's not all this pressure if it doesn't work out. Like, just enjoy the fact that we were a blessing to each other. We learned some more stuff and discovered things about ourselves. And now we're moving on, and God bless you and God bless you. So that would be the first thing. It's just like, It's okay. Take the pressure off. Secondly, I would say have fun.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Like, be adventurous and like have a blast. Like, this is such a fun time of life, and dating doesn't have to be this horrible like dramatic thing. It can literally be fun. Like go have fun and then figure out who do I want to have fun with for the rest of my life. I knew with my husband, I was like, I will never be bored for the rest of my life. Like he's
the trip. I love him to death.
He's so entertaining. He's so much fun. Yeah. He's silly. He doesn't take himself too seriously. Yeah. Like he's just the whole package, and he loves Jesus. So, but we have fun.
Yeah.
So I would say don't go on a bunch of boring dates. Like go have fun. And then I feel like I need to have 3. I don't know why, because I like odd numbers, but maybe for a third one, guideline would be really, this is a Carrie thing, but I would encourage you to take the time after you've spent time with someone and you get, some time alone that night or the next morning, journal, write out like really what was that experience like and what were the characteristics about that person that I really enjoyed, or what are the things that, really be honest and evaluate, because sometimes I think we have this little desperation thing that kicks in that thinks, oh my gosh, but if I mess this up, what if I'll never find someone else? And this is my only chance to find true love and I blew it.
Oh, of course.
And the reality is that you really weren't having that much fun, or it really wasn't that great of a connection, but you're afraid and there's a desperation kicking in. And I just don't think you have to settle.
Yeah.
You just don't have to. And so, so have fun. And I would say lastly, be a person of integrity.
Yeah.
To me, integrity it's integrated. You're not showing one thing, but there's really something else. Like just be a person of integrity so that the other person has a real chance of knowing who you are. Right. And you don't then have to keep up some facade. It's really hard long term. None of us can maintain it for very long. So just be a person of integrity.
Wow. Wonderful. And I'm going to say this going off the last point that you made about, if you're not having fun, leave, or if you're, I've never, ever regretted getting out of a relationship, ever. And I've gotten out of a lot of relationships, right? The only times I've ever regretted relationships was regretting staying in them too long. I only ever regretted staying in a relationship too long. So there's something for you. If you're out there wondering, should I break up with him or her? Do I really want to just break up? Just do. That's probably the answer, is to jet, right? And when the right time comes to lock in with somebody, you'll know. But yeah, don't build up regrets by staying in something too long and doing more damage than has to be done. I've got to end this.
Okay, but I had to add the counter to that, because I totally agree with you that
we're about to get a debate going.
If you know that it's not right, but you just don't want to be mean, or you're afraid of scarcity and like there's not going to be somebody else. Like if those are your motivations of like, I don't want to hurt this person, you need to get out. Yeah. You need to be honest. Okay. The flip side, and this is from my own personal experience, is that because I had my own stuff that was, triggering and firing, and I was like scared about different things. And oh my gosh, I had so many moments of just all out panic of thinking, I can't be with this person. I'm just going to be alone. Like I'll just stay alone for the rest of my life and I'm fine and have a good life. And I would convince myself I could just be fine alone, and would try to sabotage an amazing relationship out of my own crap. So deal with your own stuff. That has nothing to do with that other person. It has to do with like 5 people back, or it has to do with something that is just, you need to deal with your own stuff so that you can be a whole healthy person. But that's the flip side, is that if you're just freaking out because you're projecting on that person from someone else, or you just haven't done your own work, do your work so that you can become a person that's actually worthy of that person.
Deal with Joe Schmo from middle school first before you move on to Prince Charming. All right. Well, I've got to end this even though I don't want to. been a pleasure talking to you. If you guys want to learn more about her, I'll have her socials linked and her website linked. She's dropping some amazing programs. Refresh is going to drop first, and then Reigniting Femininity is going to drop later on. These are incredible programs. I'm going to have you on later just to talk literally about those. We didn't even get an opportunity to get into those, but they're truly incredible things with helpful tools that you can utilize to change your life into something that works and something that allows you to meet the needs of others in your life, but also pursue what your purpose is supposed to be. Because so many times we get told that we can't do both. Hopefully I summed those up well. Did I?
It was great. I loved it.
Okay,
Yes.
awesome. I did your own plug for you. This is perfect. Yeah, go check her out and be sure to tune in next time for the Christian Man's Guide to Not Sucking. I'm going to keep that name. All right, dilly dilly and toodles to you all.